Brad Meltzer, congratulations on this book. My God.
Thank you. Very kind of you.
I'll tell you why it's so important to me is because my father fought in World War II, and there's so many things and so many events that he had inside his heart that he never released. And this helps me get into that journey, not with just the subjects that you're talking about here, but as a student of that war. We can't forget about this war.
No, listen, World War II is not just an idea for us. It's an ideal. It's how, as Americans, we stand up to hate, we stand up to evil. And this is one of those lost stories of World War II. I didn't know about it until we started working on it, about a secret plot to kill FDR, Churchill, and Stalin at the height of the war. It's an incredible story.
And it takes place in Iran. That's the thing about it is that, I'm sorry, yeah, Iran. And the thing is that it knocked me off balance because I didn't know that it even took place.
Yeah, no, so this is just to set the stage. It's 1943. It's the moment in the war where the big three, Churchill and Stalin and Roosevelt, need to get together and see each other face to face to talk about whether they're going to do Normandy or not, what the invasion is going to be like. Can they get on that same page? Millions of lives are at stake. And this meeting in Tehran, Iran, is vital to happen. And to paint the full picture, FDR comes to town, his motorcade, everyone's looking at it, waving at him. President waves back, but here's the secret is it's not the president in the motorcade.
Oh, wow.
It's a Secret Service decoy. And the real FDR is across town, ducked down and hiding in the back of a beat up sedan because they're worried there's a Nazi assassin who's going to kill him. And I just ruined chapter 1 of the Nazi conspiracy, but that's literally chapter 1 of the book.
As a writer, did you see it playing out inside your imagination as you were putting it inside that computer? Because, I mean, it does play out like one of these like a great binge watch on Hulu.
Listen, I wish I could make this up. This is all a true story. It all really happened. And so as we were doing the research, of course I see it in my head that same way because you can't not. It almost wrote itself. And it had these people from real life. There's a Nazi named Otto Skorzeny in the book. And I'd never heard of him, but he's one of the top fighters in special operations. And Adolf Hitler asked him to come to the Wolf Slayer. Adolf Hitler's obviously his secret headquarters. And when he gets there, Hitler has brought all of his special operations people there, puts them shoulder to shoulder and tests them with one question. He says to them, "What do you think of Italy?" And in that moment, they all say, "Oh, we love Italy. We fight along. They're our ally here." And one voice, Otto Skorzeny, shouts out and says, "I am from Austria, my Führer." And he knows that Hitler's from Austria. Oh. And in that moment, he knows that anyone who's really from Austria resents Italy because Italy took a key part of Austria in World War I, never returned it. And Adolf Hitler turns to this Nazi, Otto Skorzeny, is like, "You're my guy," and sends him on a secret mission that when you see the secret mission in the Nazi conspiracy, Josh mentioned, my co-writer, we actually asked that a real photograph be put in the book of this moment because we're like, no one will believe it unless they actually see it.
Do you find what you researched sort of playing out in the days that we're facing right now? Because it seems like there's a lot of movement going on and there's a lot of people that need to be put into place, but they don't know where to find them yet if they haven't already have.
Well, that's the truth. When we see Kanye West shooting his mouth off about the Jewish people, when you see Charlottesville happening here, you feel like, oh, how could this happen in America? But we found when we were researching the book that there was a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden in New York City that took place in World War II, 20,000 Nazis cheering. And the first speaker of the day says that if George Washington was alive today, he'd be friends with Adolf Hitler. And to me, what we have to realize is we're still fighting Nazis in 2023, and we got to use our voices. If you don't tell these stories, you repeat them. And we forget that the Holocaust doesn't start with death camps. The Holocaust starts with slogans and rallies and propaganda and book bans. And it just takes people who just stand by and watch it happen. So yes, we wrote this book to entertain you, for the history lover in your life, and if you love history, but we also wrote this book to warn you so that you can make sure that we don't relive it.
The book we're talking about is The Nazi Conspiracy, Stalin meeting up with President Roosevelt before Churchill arrived. I found that very interesting.
Yeah, it really is. Someone said to me, that they thought that the way we did Stalin and Churchill and FDR, they said they loved their mean girl vibe. And like we tell the stories of these three men as if they're these kind of gods who are fighting for good. And we forget they're just human beings and their egos are there. And, FDR has this unending belief, never ending belief that he can be the most charming guy in the room. And he believes that he can charm Stalin, and because he's like, Stalin likes me better than you, Churchill. And he believes he can charge Churchill because he knows Churchill likes him better than he likes Stalin. And the one thing is, he's absolutely right. The best presidents in history, take Lincoln, take George Washington, it's not that they give the best speeches. It's not that they make the best promises. It's that when a disaster strikes, they're the ones who can adapt and deal with that problem. And that's what FDR does in that moment.
Well, that's another area that a lot of people I wish would dig into as well, to find out who this guy really was. It's more than just black and white photographs, more than just what we see on the front page of a newspaper. This guy has got a purpose and a reason why he became who he is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, FDR is so fascinating. One of the moments, you just forget the strength of the man. One of my favorite moments in the book is you see FDR right after Pearl Harbor, and he wants to give the speech. Of course, is famous, that December 7th is a day which will live in infamy. And if you actually, as he's going to give the speech, usually they'll wheel him in a wheelchair and bring him to the front of the podium, and then he'll kind of pick himself up, and they hide it from the public. But he says that day, no, I want to walk myself up there. And of course, he suffers from polio. So he takes his, instead of rolling him up there or sometimes carrying him up there, he uses his arm crutches on his own, drags the dead weight of his legs behind him as he goes. When he goes to the podium, he's using his hands to hold himself up. If you look at the video on YouTube, you can see he doesn't accentuate any points with hand motions because he's physically holding himself up and willing himself up to stand. He only moves his head to make points and to make those different motions. It's an incredible moment that just reveals so much character of who he is.
While you were putting it together, did you ever question what would have happened if this would have gone through?
You can't not ask that question, right? I mean, it's a secret Nazi plot to take out the big three. And what's amazing to me is not just that it almost happened, but it's also, you can't help but ask what happens to the war if it does happen, because these are the three architects of Normandy and what happens there. Listen, it's not that I think we would suddenly have swastikas in Times Square, like, a movie, but my God, back then perception was reality. And, when FDR and Churchill met in Morocco, in Casablanca, that became the sign that the Allies were strong and standing together. So at this moment in the war, just as the Nazis are starting to struggle, to have the big three taken out in that moment, my God, it could have changed the course of the entire war.
What was it, a leak? How did they know? What led to that? Hey, we better take another look at this.
Well, what's amazing is it's very hard to know exactly when the Nazis found out about the big three meeting, but the Nazi intelligence used to keep their top secret information on what they called brown sheets, which would name that because they were just dark brown pieces of paper that they were written on. And when you got the brown sheet delivered, it came in a special zipper case. You had to destroy it after a month. It was like the Mission Impossible briefcase, but for Nazis. And one of the things that was fascinating is that Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda specialist for the Nazis, used to keep extensive diaries. And because of that, we were able to realize that he had written down some of the intelligence reports in his diaries, which was, of course, idiocy, but he couldn't help himself. And it was there we found out that, how in the Enigma machines, we, of course, know the story that we cracked the Nazi codes. What I didn't know is that they had cracked our codes. They were listening in on international cables, and FDR and what Churchill were saying to each other. And my God, when you get that, and you have a man on the ground in Tehran who's a Nazi spy, the Nazis get the most amazing thing that anyone gets in the middle of a fight, which is an opportunity.
And this spy was, 19 years old?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's one. Franz Mayer is actually, when we meet him, he's in his 20s. He starts at 19, and he, you have these 20-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And the truth is Berlin thought, when they lost control of Tehran, they thought he died. They thought he ran away or someone killed him. They didn't even know he was still there. And he's slowly, over time, this guy Franz Mayer, again, someone I'd never heard of, a footnote in history, suddenly starts building up this group of Nazi sympathizers. He's building his own underground network, and he gets word back to Berlin and says, hey, here's a drop zone you can parachute in. Here's where you can send me supplies. I think we're going to make this work. And they see this, and now suddenly the big three are coming to Tehran, where this Nazi spy is. It's an amazing twist of fate. I won't ruin, of course, how it ends and how he gets caught, but it's an incredible moment. He's sleeping with a woman who's sleeping with someone else, and the whole thing is like, you can't even make this stuff up. It's all, and we all know FDR and Churchill, but these stories of these smaller figures are no less important, no less vital.
Wow. The book we're talking about is The Nazi Conspiracy. This is the beginning, middle, and end, because I was very touched by Churchill's reaction at the loss of President Roosevelt.
Yeah, one of the I love those moments, and I'm even going to go back to one of the beginning moments when we first meet Churchill in the book. It's right after Pearl Harbor, and it's right after Adolf Hitler declares war on America, and Churchill remembers this great quote about America, that it's like a gigantic boiler. America, the United States, is like a gigantic boiler, and once you light a fire there, there's no limit to the amount of power it will produce. And he's right, of course. And when FDR dies, watching Churchill's reaction, I don't want to ruin that moment, but it's just heartbreaking when you see it in the book. And you don't see them as these giant figures, but you see them as they are, which is human beings just trying to do well by each other and by this country.
I got to tell you, I got to give you kudos in the way that you put the words together, is that you don't overdo the words and overpaint the picture. You give us that opportunity to sit there and think about what you're sharing, but at the same time, you make it, like compelling enough for us to just continue. No, I got to read one more page. No, I got to read one more page.
Well, listen, I'm a thriller writer at base. That's where I got my start. And so I don't want the pacing to be boring. I want the pacing to be full of action. This book should read like an action movie, like a Mission Impossible movie, but it all really happened. And to me, I don't have to add flowery language or tell you what the weather was or how the humidity was. Like, this is Winston Churchill and FDR and Stalin meeting for the first time, and you don't know if, they can't tell if Stalin wants to hug him or kill him. It's a tense moment, and all of history is about to change. And I think what people have loved about the book, and our best reviews have said, is that instead of dealing with the kind of sweeping things we've seen already, you see the humanity behind it. You see the Nazis who are trying to kill them. You see these people that are all struggling to kind of do right by their various countries. And
also in this, let's treat this like a novel and or a movie, making a cameo appearance and or just a role in this. Operation Overlord brought in Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Yeah, so one of the things that everyone always asks, why do I not know this story?
You right.
And the reason is when FDR comes back from the meeting, he's like, oh, the meeting went well. He holds a press conference at the White House, and then he says, yeah, and the Nazis tried to kill us. And of course, it makes the front page of every paper. It's a major story. But then, as you said, Normandy happened. 150,000 men in the first wave, 1 million more on standby coming after that. Eisenhower, of course, and this incredible moment of Normandy takes over, and this story in the Nazi conspiracy becomes a footnote to history until, of course, people like myself and my co-writer Josh Mensch realize this is just an incredible story as well. Wow.
Brad, where can people go to find out more about you and this story and give you lots of love? Because you've got books out there that people need to put on, inside their Kindle and or on their shelf.
You're very kind. They can go to bradmeltzer.com. It's like seltzer that you drink, but with an M like Mary. But you can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and everywhere else. And you can buy the book on Amazon or your local bookstore. You can download it. It's on ebook or on audio or on hardcover. And if you have someone who loves history in their life, this is obviously a great present. But I think what people are going to like is just reading it themselves.
Absolutely. Are you a historian or are you an archaeologist? What do you feel like?
Oh man, it's funny when you first said a story and I said that, but when you say archaeologist, then I become Indiana Jones. So how do I not say that? It belongs in a museum.
Please come back to the show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you, Brad.
I appreciate it, my brother. Thanks for the support with the Nazi conspiracy. It means more than I can express, and I express for a living too.
Be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you, sir.